James Carbary is the founder of Sweetfish Media and co-host of B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B marketing leaders. James is a contributor for Entrepreneur and Business Insider, and he's the author of Content-Based Networking, How to Instantly Connect with Anyone You Want to Know. I have become a big fan and follower of James Carbary over the past year or so, and I was so excited about today's episode. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed doing it. Welcome to the PR Maven Podcast, a podcast all about growing your network and building your brand through traditional and digital networking techniques. I'm Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven and CEO of Marshall Communications. I've been strengthening brands through PR for over 35 years, and now I'm celebrating the success of executives, influencers, business owners, and entrepreneurs from all around the world, all of whom have cultivated their brands and broadened their networks through traditional and digital networking methods. Each week, I interview one of these interesting and influential individuals and provide an opportunity for you, the PR Maven Nation, to gain insights from their strategies and stories. So stay tuned for this week's episode, and thanks for listening. So James, your book and your TED Talk align so well with my podcast. I feel we could probably talk for weeks and I wouldn't even take a breath, but I might die. So we don't want that to happen.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nancy. That is super kind, and I'm really excited for this conversation.
Me too. So I watched your TED Talk. Actually, I think I've seen it 2 or 3 times, and I want to hear about the football game that changed the course of your life.
Yes. So when I was, I think, 22 years old, my roommate's brother-in-law won a sweepstakes through this phone company called Alltel. I don't think they're in business anymore. And it was one of those sweepstakes that you see on TV. And you're like, nobody ever actually wins those. But it was like, text the word football to 5578 and you can win an all expense trip to a professional football game of your choice on a private jet, hang out with, a celebrity while you're at the game. And so you're like, nobody wins those. Well, my roommate's brother-in-law won it, and he got to take 9 or 10 friends with him to the game on the private jet. And because he had just moved to Oklahoma, he didn't have a lot of friends in the area. So we went to my roommate, and he was like, who is his brother-in-law? And he said, hey, you want to get some of your buddies together and get on this private jet and go to a Giants Cowboys game in New York City? And so when my roommate asked me, he was like, hey, would you want to go on this? First, I thought he was kidding. And once I figured out, this is a real thing, I was like, well, duh, of course I want to go on this private jet to go to a Giants Cowboys game. So we get there, and Barry Sanders, the most prolific running back of all time, is waiting for us as we get off the jet. And we end up getting toured around the city before the game, basically all day. Took this limo bus to Carnegie Deli, the Empire State Building, did all this stuff. And throughout the course of the trip, there's this guy named Jeff that was organizing all the transportation. And I didn't really think anything about it. I just assumed he worked for Alltel or something like that. But I ended up hitting it off with this guy, and we talked about faith, family, work, all kinds of stuff, and really connected with this guy. He ended up going to the game with us that night. We continued to chat. And on the way back, he was putting us on the jet for us to go back to Oklahoma, where we were all from. And we swapped business cards, or I didn't even have a business card at the time, but he gave me his business card and I gave him my email address, and I didn't think anything of it. Well, come to find out, this guy was the CEO of a global logistics company that works with a bunch of massive brands like Alltel and Verizon and all of these big brands. And his company organizes the logistics at large events like the Super Bowl and all of these like big events like sweepstakes and that kind of stuff. And so I'm like, oh man, this guy is a really big deal. And so I stayed in contact with him. And about I think it was probably 2 years later, he calls me. I was working in an oil and gas company in Oklahoma City. And he said, James, would you want to move to Orlando and run the helicopter division of my business, or help run the helicopter division of my business? And so I prayed about it for a few days and ultimately decided to pack up my life, move across the country. And that single relationship with Jeff literally changed the trajectory trajectory of my entire life, because I met my wife in Orlando. After working for Jeff for a few years, I realized that entrepreneurship was something I wanted to pursue for myself. So ended up starting my own business after leaving Jeff's company. And so I credit so much of where I am today based on that serendipitous relationship that I created with Jeff. And as I started my own business, I thought, man, what that single relationship changed everything for me. But what if we didn't need a serendipitous event to change our lives? What if we could actually reverse engineer relationships with the exact people that we want to know? And that's really where the book and the TED Talk and everything came out of, is this concept that we figured out called content-based networking, which is this idea of content collaboration. Instead of just randomly meeting Jeff, what if I could proactively invite people to be a guest on my podcast or video series or blog series, whatever type of content I'm creating? If I can identify, okay, this person, I want to know this person for whatever reason. They can advance my career, they can become a customer, they could become a potential referral partner. Instead of just going and asking them for something, which is what most people do, instead saying, hey, I want to shine my spotlight on you. I'd love to feature you in my content. And so, yeah, that's how it all started, was that relationship with Jeff and trying to figure out, how do I reverse engineer the exact relationships that I want to build without having to depend on winning a once in a lifetime sweepstakes.
Well, I have so much to say about that. For one thing, I have two sons who would die and go to heaven if they could go to a Giants and Cowboys game. We had a Labrador Retriever dog whose name was LT when my kids were, and it was a female dog, so it was Lady Taylor, not Lawrence Taylor.
Yes, I love that.
Big Giants fans. And even though we're from New England, I think prior to even the Patriots being invented, the Giants were the team for everybody in New England. So some people are holdovers. And
that's awesome.
Of course, the Cowboys, they're legendary as well. So that was quite a big prize that your brother-in-law won there.
Yeah, it was unreal. It was my roommate's brother-in-law, and man, yeah, we got to sit. They put us in a suite right next to Jerry Jones, so we're literally like knocking on the glass, waving at Jerry Jones while we're watching the game. It was absolutely unreal.
But the other thing about your story that resonates so much with me, and I talk a lot about building your personal brand and how having a strong personal brand will attract the right people into your life, just like a magnet. And sometimes people think it's sort of opportunistic, like, oh, you're taking advantage of other people. But I don't think of it that way at all. And I don't think you do either. Relationships are really the key to success and happiness in life, personally and professionally. And how do you think about that, James?
Yeah, Nancy. So I don't think we use the term friendship enough in business. And I think this strategy of content-based networking, creating content, collaborating with the people that you want to know, what it's doing is the way I think about it, it's allowing me to initiate friendships with people that otherwise it would be really hard to connect with them, because we don't have a reason that we're not just there. There is no other serendipitous reason that would connect us. But if I start some sort of a content platform, whether it be a podcast or a blog or whatever, and I make that platform about their expertise, then I can all of a sudden go after those types of people and say, hey, I want to shine a spotlight on the work you're doing, on the challenges that you've overcome, of the things that you've learned over the course of your career, your journey. Then you're benefiting them. It's not just that they're giving you something, because they might not give you anything. Most of the guests that we've had on our show, B2B Growth, have never done business with us. They've never paid us a dime, but we've still given them exposure to our audience, and that has behooved them. And so even if somebody hasn't done business with us necessarily, they still think very positively of us. And we've established a friendship with that person. And so who knows, life is very long, and you never know, we'll have some people that come on our show that become customers years later. And so I don't think you go into it necessarily thinking like, what can I get out of this person? You go into it thinking, how can I add the most amount of value to this person? And I think there's so many ways to do that. But you did a masterful job just on this interview of, looking at the TED Talk and looking at the book and like doing research on the ahead of the interview. And I think that communicates a lot that you care about the content. You want to put your guest, in this case, it's me, in a very positive light with your audience. Well, that makes me, that like warms me to you. I want to help you in whatever way I can because you've given first. And I think that's what a strategy like this allows people to do is truly give first.
Well, in our pre-interview chat, I was telling you how I believe that finding podcasting or starting to do a podcast for me has totally given me sort of a new breath of fresh air in my career. And I think a big reason is that I can now have this kind of conversation with a person like you. So previously, I would have watched your TED Talk and read your book and thought, wow, he is awesome. But I might have maybe like commented on your LinkedIn page, like, you're awesome. But because I have this podcast now, I can actually have a 40-minute conversation with you. And then I'm sure we'll stay in touch. And who knows, if COVID ever ends, maybe we'll actually meet.
Meet in real life.
Yeah, right. Without a mask on. Let's hope. So, James, I'm really interested in this. How can a person create a repeatable process to build relationships?
Yeah, so I think the way I break it down in the book is you first got to get really clear on your goal. And so for me, in my context, I was starting a business and my goal was new customers. We needed customers to buy our service, our podcasting service. And so we figured out that the way to do that was to start a podcast called B2B Growth and interview those people that would be ideal clients for us on the show. So we had a very clear goal. We needed customers. That might not be everybody's goal. Somebody listening to this might be thinking, well, I need a job, or I need a particular type of referral relationship because I sell into government, and I know that if I can get a referral in from somebody else, that expedites the sales process for me. So you've got to get real clear on your goal. Like, what is it that you're wanting to do? And then you start to figure out, okay, based on what I want to do, who are the relationships that I need? Who are the people that I need to build relationships with so that I can accelerate my path toward those goals? And it's not just a one-sided thing. The way you're going to get to your goal is actually to provide value to those people first, but you have to think, who are those people that can help me achieve my goals and dreams? And so when you get clear on those two things, what's your goal? And then who are the people that can help me achieve that goal? Then it's just a matter of figuring out what is the content platform that I want to create so that I can kind of eliminate serendipity and proactively ask these people to create content with me. And the biggest mistake I see, Nancy, is folks branding their show around themselves instead of branding it around the people that they want to connect with. And so had we named our show the Sweetfish Media Show, it would have alienated us from being able to interview a lot of the people that we've been able to interview. And so because we named our show B2B Growth, it opened up a world of possibilities for who we could interview. And because our buyers are VPs of marketing at B2B tech companies with 50 plus employees, that's who we've honed in on. And so now every day we're asking VPs of marketing at B2B tech companies with 50 plus employees to be a guest on our show to share their story, to share their career journey or things they've learned or challenges they've overcome. We're creating great content. We're learning a ton about our target market and what they're going through, the language they use. And so it makes us smarter as a sales and marketing organization, but it also allows us to create content that a bunch of other VPs of marketing at B2B tech companies are going to want to consume because folks want to hear from their peers. So that's our systematic process. We figured out what our goal was. We figured out who our people were. And then we went about creating a podcast that allowed us and positioned us really to go and interview those people every single day. And that's the system that has allowed us to, bootstrap a 7-figure business in a few years.
Well, that's awesome. And I love the idea of branding the show around those that you're interviewing. And I've actually tried to brand my show around a technique. I like to incorporate old techniques with the new techniques available to build your network and grow your brand. So it is the PR Maven podcast, but I try to talk about networking both face to face, sort of the old fashioned way, but also leveraging all of the technology that's available to us to connect and extend relationships with people. Because I believe that if you meet somebody in person, you need to extend the relationship online. And if you meet first online, you need to endeavor to meet somebody in person, because that's really where the magic happens. Like what happened with you and Jeff on that day in New York City.
You're exactly right. Have you been able to leverage your show, Nancy, for biz dev?
Yes, as a matter of fact, one of the things that we do is the Marshall Plan, which is our 65-step process to create a strategic marketing communications plan. And we actually were hired by an insurance company to create the whole brand around their podcast and all the processes. And so we applied our Marshall Plan process to a specific challenge that they were having, which was creating their own podcast. So that was great. And then I also find that any prospective client that's considering hiring my agency, which is Marshall Communications, that people will listen to the podcast and kind of get to know my attitude and my approach better, and kind of warms people up. It speeds up the sale.
That's the thing I love so much about podcasting is it's got this dual-sided benefit. It's the same, we're not just turning guests into customers, but we're also turning listeners into customers. And so in the same way, people that come and look at working with our agency, they look at B2B Growth, and that allows them to trust us before signing a contract to have us produce their show for them. But then we're also on the other side of that, interviewing the exact people that could potentially do business with us if they were ever in the market to do a podcast. And so we're getting it on both sides. Both the guests that we're featuring turn into customers, and listeners turn into customers, like what you just described. So I love that it's working for you that way.
And it also allows me to tap into my guests network also. So I'm sure you find the same thing. Obviously, if I interview someone with a very large network like you have, then your people are going to be aware of the PR Maven and Marshall Communications. And so it works well that way as well. And what you talk about, a podcast, I think of it as cornerstone content. Stephen Westner is someone who I've followed and learned a lot from. He's the author of the book Profitable Podcasting. I don't know if you know Stephen.
I do. I'm actually pretty good friends with him. I'm looking at his book right now. His newest book he wrote with my good friend Drew McClellan, and I love Stephen and what he and his team are up to as well.
Well, I follow both. I'm part of the Agency Management Institute with Drew, and so I'm
awesome.
Very
so
familiar.
Am I. Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's what we have in common then. Yeah. So their new book on authority marketing, it definitely resonated with me. And, I use those techniques. And I originally learned about podcasting at Disney at a workshop that I attended with Stephen and Drew. And Stephen talked a lot about this whole concept of a big chunk of cornerstone content and then slicing and dicing it into little pebbles or cobblestones that you share through social or other methods. So I share it through my monthly e-newsletter and all of my social media platforms, and in a whole Forbes.com and a whole variety of other ways.
Yep. It's such a smart way to create content one time and then leverage that content in a ton of different ways, so that you're constantly staying top of mind with the people that you want to be staying top of mind with.
Right, exactly. So some people might accuse us of being strident or using others if we approach relationships in this way. And how do you justify going after relationships that benefit you?
Yeah. So I think, Nancy, for me, it's knowing that I'm always trying to add more value to them than I take. So I'm also not going in with the mindset of in order for me to follow through with my commitment of featuring them on our show, they have to do something for me. That's not at all the mindset. The mindset is I want to share their voice. I want to make them look like the rock star that they are to our audience. I want to ask them smart questions. I want to figure out what their unique and differentiated point of view is. And by doing that and positioning them in a really good light and giving them a platform to share that message, I know that that's enormous value to them. They can show that to their boss. They can show that to potential, maybe future employers. They can put it on social as they're establishing their personal brand. And having a third party show that is not their show, but somebody else's show that is pointing the spotlight on them inherently makes them look great. And so I know that by doing this, I'm giving them enormous value. And through the course of the relationship, they're naturally going to figure out what we do as a business and that we produce podcasts. And nobody, myself, our director of partnerships, nobody on our team is ever pushing or twisting someone's arm into working with us. It's essentially making them aware of what we do. And if they're interested, we talk to them about what it can look like to work with them. And so I don't necessarily struggle with feeling like we're being strident or kind of the bait and switch. I hear people say, hey, are you worried about the bait and switch? And I'm really not, because at the end of the day, if someone decides not to work with us, I'm totally okay with it. And if they want to work with us, that's obviously awesome too. My goal is to try to create the most great, like the most amount of great content we can create. And I know that the best way to do that is by interviewing our ideal buyers, talking to them about their life, their world, how they're getting better at work every day, knowing that that's going to help other people that look like them. And so that's my approach, and that's how I think about it. And so far, it's worked out really well for us. We've done over 1,600 episodes of B2B Growth, and we have a great reputation in the industry. We've built hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of quality relationships that are continuing to produce fruit for our business, but even in ways beyond just new business, referrals and different things that pop up, media opportunities, opportunities to speak at conferences. The amount of the positive things that can happen through building a relationship through this content collaborative, this method of content collaboration, what we call content-based networking, is really endless. It's crazy. I talk a lot about it in the book, but it seems like every week we're finding a new benefit of building these relationships in the way that we're doing it.
And isn't it the best thing when you actually make a real friend? I mean,
yes, exactly.
I mean, that's where I always say that if you do all this right, it's going to lead to so much personal happiness because you're going to find your people.
Yeah, exactly. We had somebody, it was 4th of July weekend. And we had a friend of mine that I had interviewed on the podcast, I don't know, 700 or 800 episodes ago, might have even been more. I had him on the show. We became friends. I went and visited him out in San Francisco, probably, I don't know, a year after the interview, and him and his wife just stayed in our guest room a few weeks ago. And that would have never happened had I not interviewed him on our podcast hundreds and hundreds of episodes ago. So I just think it's so cool that we can actually build genuine friendships. And I think, if we've got, we're all going to be working about 90,000 hours of our life. And I want to spend as much of those 90,000 hours working with people that I really like. And this approach allows us to do just that.
So that's really how you can set your intention to create relationships that benefit you both personally and professionally.
Yes, exactly.
It always reminds me of the song. Well, we used to sing it in Brownies. You probably weren't in Brownies, but about make new friends, but keep the old. And one is silver and the other's gold.
The other gold. Yes. I wasn't in Brownies, but I was very familiar with that song.
So I, as you probably can tell, am an extrovert. There's not an introverted bone in my body. I'm kind of off the charts. So if there's a chart of 1 to 10 of extroversion, I'm probably a 20. But Emma, who works for me, and she probably contacted you to set up this time, but she is a real introvert. And actually, she and I really respect each other because we both wish we were a little more like the other. I feel like I could stand to be a little more introverted, and she would be like to be a little extroverted. So how can someone like Emma come out of her shell and implement this kind of a strategy when it just gives you like night sweats to think about it?
So what I like about this strategy is you can do it in person, but you can also do it digitally. So you can do Zoom calls or something like what we're doing on Ringer right now. And so that might lessen the anxiety, knowing that you can do this from the comfort of your own home and essentially connect with anybody that you want to connect with anywhere in the world. The other thing too is I think having a focus of the conversation, knowing that you're going into these conversations to talk about a person's book or a certain element of their career journey that you've researched prior to, having questions going into it, I think can alleviate some anxiety. But at the end of the day, it's really just a conversation. And I know that, you can throttle back and say, hey, I'm super introverted, so I'm only going to do one conversation a week, as opposed to, our team who's doing multiple conversations for the show every day. So I think that's another lever that Emma could pull to say, hey, I'm only going to do interviews, once a week. I can't handle doing it daily. Or maybe once a week is too much. Maybe she wants to do it once a month. And so I think you can control the amount of conversations that you have using a strategy like this. Obviously, the more you do, the more relationships you're going to create, and the better the business benefit is as a result of creating more relationships. But I definitely don't think that being introverted should be something that stops anyone from executing this strategy.
The other thing that I always tell introverts is that they tend to be really good listeners because they tend to listen more than talk. And actually, something my mother taught me when I was growing up was that people are really flattered if you ask a question and then really listen to them. And they're going to like you more if you listen. So I think introverts almost have an advantage over us extroverts.
I would agree with that. I actually think you're spot on there, that the better of a listener you are, that is a direct correlation to, I think, some of the best co-hosts or the best podcast hosts that we know of. When you think of a great host, you think of someone who genuinely listens really well. I was just talking with my wife about Joe Rogan, and what makes Joe, in my opinion, a prolific podcast host is he genuinely, he listens really well. And you can tell in the way that he engages with each of his guests that he actually heard what they said. He also can push back and argue without shutting down the conversation, which I think might be another kind of introvert skill. But I love that you brought that up. I think it's spot on.
I also enjoy Joe Rogan's podcast, and I'm glad you brought him up because, yeah, if you're really listening instead of focusing on the next thing you're going to say, people can tell that also.
You're exactly right.
Well, we're going to take a little break and hear a little bit about my new message mapping mastery online course that I created during COVID-19, and message mapping mastery. Thanks. Yeah. So I got really inspired, in mid-March when all of a sudden the world shut down. I thought, wow, this is an opportunity. So I got busy. But we'll be back with more from James Carbary in just a moment.
Do you want to grow your client or customer base? Perhaps increase brand awareness? Maybe tell your unique story more effectively? Of course you do. But you may be worried that you don't have enough expertise to make that happen. Well, no worries, PR Maven Nation. Let the PR Maven herself, Nancy Marshall, show you how easy it is to get your message across effectively using a powerful yet simple tool, a message map. Nancy's training is often called informative and constructive, well-designed and impactful, with a perfect blend of theory and real-life experience. You will leverage Nancy's expertise to create your own message map when you register for this comprehensive online video training course, which is broken down into 4 easy-to-understand modules. Normally, this course is priced at $147, but for listeners of the PR Maven podcast, that's you, PR Maven Nation, it's only $29 when you enter the code word podcast during enrollment. It even includes a workbook and bonus content to guide you through the process. So go to prmaven.com and click on the Message Map Mastery course to enroll today. Remember, enter the word podcast during enrollment for a special discounted price of $29.
So welcome back, and today we're talking with James Carbary, founder of Sweet Fish Media, and I want to dive right back in with more questions. First, I want to ask you, where does the name Sweet Fish Media come from?
Yeah, so people ask this all the time. All of our new employees, that's like the first question they ask. So I love the candy Swedish Fish. And when we were trying to come up with the name for the business, I was, we were throwing a bunch of names against the wall, and, we was almost Red Fish. And my roommate at the time was like, what if you went with Sweet Fish? And as soon as he said it, I thought that's it. So that's about as fancy as we get around here, naming the entire business after after my affinity for my sweet tooth.
I haven't had Swedish Fish for a long time, but yeah, I like the red ones.
Yes.
I like the red ones better than the yellow ones.
Yeah, it's crazy when you name your business after your favorite candy. Everybody sends you it. So if you ever wanted to figure out a way to hack getting everyone you meet to send you your favorite candy, just name your business after it, because it has worked. And so people have sent me all kinds. There's actually a it's not a knockoff. It's like a sugar-free version of the candy, and it's actually called Sweet Fish. So it is legitimately like straight up our name, but it's a sugar-free version of the candy. So whenever I'm dieting, those are my go-tos.
I was just thinking I should start a business called Celery Media.
Yes.
Somebody sends me celery because that's what I should be eating.
Yes, that would be the way to do it right there.
Or I could have a business called Vodka Media.
Yes, I'm into that.
So, James, your podcast, B2B Growth, has been ranked in the top 100 in the business category by iTunes. How did you do that? And what's your recommendation for the PR Maven podcast to grow its audience?
Yes. So I think there are so many different things you can do. I will say to those listening to this that are getting into podcasting, that podcasting is it's just very hard to, it's very hard and slow to grow an audience. So I will say the biggest thing that we've done with B2B Growth is we ranked for the keyword B2B in podcasting platforms. And what we've done recently, we've actually added a tagline to the show. So it's B2B Growth : your daily B2B marketing podcast. So now we not only rank for B2B, but we also rank for the term B2B marketing. And so I think naming your show, the way you name your show really matters in terms of being able to rank for what people are searching for in Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So that's one way to do it. I would say that the name of our show is legitimately the reason that we've been able to amass the audience that we've been able to amass. And then the other thing that I think that really matters is trying to optimize for getting as many ratings as you can. So with PR Maven, you guys have obviously already named the show well. So it's, you're trying to attract people that are interested in PR. But I think trying to get as many people as you can to leave a rating of the show. So we've done call to actions in the episodes. We ask our guests to leave a rating. We do a lot of things to make sure that we're continually getting more and more ratings for the show. I think we've got, and we could do a lot better. We've done over 1,600 episodes and we still only have, I think, 315 ratings or something like that. But the ratings certainly help. And then I also think the volume and consistency matters. So I know that you guys are really consistent, Nancy, with this show. One other tactic that I know has helped us is doing like either takeover episodes or we'll do ad swaps with other podcasts. So we did this with my friend Douglas Burdett at the Marketing Book Podcast, where he promoted our show on his podcast for a month, and we promoted his show on B2B Growth for a month. And so we were able to share each other's audiences and give exposure to the other show to our audience. And so you can do that with not necessarily in the early days, but at the stage where you're at, Nancy, I think where you've got over 100 episodes, you could probably go to other shows that have a similar sized audience and say, hey, would you want to do some promo swaps where I talk about your show for, a month and you talk about my show for a month? So I think I think a lot of what I just said there tactically would help you get to that point. But I also don't want to encourage anyone, just because our show is a top 100 show, I still think you can get enormous benefits from having a podcast or some sort of content platform. Even if you're not a top 100 show, you can still leverage it to connect with the people that you want to connect with, regardless of having that, fancy ranking. We would still be using our podcast in the way we're using it today, apart from having an accolade like top 100 in the marketing category. So regardless, those are some things that I think you could try that would move the needle.
Well, certainly those accolades and being on those kinds of lists helps give you credibility and authority. Yeah, so congratulations on that.
That's the other thing about having big name guests on your show too. We don't have it often. It's usually we're interviewing practitioners that are, in the trenches and doing the work. But we've had Gary Vee on the show. We've had Simon Sinek on the show. We've had Noah Kagan on the show. And so it certainly doesn't hurt to have a few of those names so that whenever you're reaching out to your ideal clients to be a guest on the show, you can say, hey, we've had John Doe or whatever.
I've had John Lee Dumas on my show. Have you had John Lee Dumas on yours?
Yeah, we had him on another show that we did. So I can't remember if he's been on B2B Growth or not, but yeah, he's a great guy. And being able to have people like that on your show, it does. You're exactly right, Nancy. It does give you credibility and allows you to go and get the other people that you really want to be a guest by being able to say that you've had guys like John on.
That's right. Yeah, and of course he's from the state of Maine, where I'm from too. So
yes,
we've met him I've met him in person too. We have a group through the Portland Pod where I'm recording today. And it's a group of podcasters, and he came and had a few beers with us one night, and we hung out. It was really great.
I love it.
So, James, there's an African proverb that you quoted in your TED Talk. I really liked that. Can you share that with us today?
Yes, I can. So the proverb that I mentioned, it was, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think it really encapsulates this idea that we've been talking about building friendships. And, I think my next book is actually going to be called Go Further, Faster Together. I just think there's so much benefit to collaboration and doing things together as opposed to trying to climb up our own mountain by ourselves. I just think we can learn so much from one another. And I think we can just produce better things whenever we put our heads together and try to do things together and collaboratively. That's the proverb.
Well, I love that because I am somebody who does like to go fast in my career and in my car too. And I do tend to go alone quite a bit, but and I do find that you have to slow down a lot of times to work with other people. And I have to remind myself that they bring a lot to the party, I think because my mind works quickly, as far as if I'm faced with a challenge, I can map it out in my mind very quickly and I want to just dive right in. But sometimes to slow down a little bit and think things through is better. Yes,
I've learned that as we've just been scaling, our little business in the early days. I could think through and try to problem solve and move very quickly. But as the team has grown and you've got to make sure that the right communication is happening and that everybody knows that we're, the direction that we're swimming in at all times, it's a whole lot more efficient than me just breaking everything all the time and saying, nope, we're doing it a new way. And then it's caused me more headaches than I would like to be true. But lesson learned, and hopefully I'll be better tomorrow because of it.
Well, I also feel that during this era of COVID, that over communicating is important, especially with so many people working from home and, teams of people who previously might have been together all the time every day. And now they're all in their own little space at home. It's really important to make sure everybody knows what's going on, and people are experiencing so much anxiety and fear right now too, that I think information helps to calm them, and especially here that there is a shared vision and a mission, and that the company has a path forward despite this terrible pandemic we're all facing.
Yes, I think we've been a fully remote team since we've started, but since all this has gone down, I feel like we've doubled down. Even though we were already accustomed to being remote, it's still forced us to really think about how much we communicate and needing to communicate more, not just internally, but with our customers as well. So I think there are a lot of businesses, obviously, that are hurting because of this, but I think that there are a lot of businesses that are going to come out on the other side of this better, because there's nothing like there's nothing like a crisis to really get you thinking critically and trying to attack problems in different ways that you didn't even know you had before.
That's right. Isn't there something about how the Chinese symbol for crisis actually also means opportunity?
Yes, I love that.
Yeah. So how can content help a person to stand out and get noticed?
Yeah. So, man, so many different ways that content can help you do that. I am obviously a big advocate for using it as a way to build one-to-one relationships. And so by using the fact that you host a show, or that you do a blog series, or that you have a LinkedIn Live series, I think so many people think of content in terms of like wanting to reach the masses. But even if you're just starting out, I think being able to approach someone individually and say, hey, I would love to feature you on, insert whatever content you're creating. I think that ability is going to make you stand out from the sea of other people that are emailing those same people, trying to book a demo or trying to sell them on something. When you reach out and say, hey, I want to feature you, I want to interview you about your expertise, you immediately stand out. And you're going to find that way more people respond to your cold outreach than everybody else who's trying to reach out and extract value from them, trying to sell them something or get them to do something for them. And so that's a big way that I think this type of content helps you stand out.
Well, I am so tired of those emails that I get, just cold emails from people I've never heard of before. Oh, do you have time to jump on a quick call?
Yes.
It's like, no, I don't. Sorry. I don't have time to jump on a quick call for you to sell me on something I'm not interested in.
Yes, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. But if those people were to reach out and had, legitimately want to feature you in content that they're creating, and they love your method and they love the different things that you've done on social or with your business over the last 30 years, well, you're a heck of a lot more likely to want to engage with, because they're wanting to shine a spotlight on you. And especially being in PR, how valuable that kind of attention can be. And so I think just in the example that you just shared, I don't think I've ever said no to being asked to be on someone's podcast. And I don't know that I have said yes more than maybe one time in the last year to somebody that happened to email me and with a product or service to sell. And so I just think it works. If it works for you and I, it can work for a lot of other people. That's
right. Absolutely. James, is there a book, an app, or a website that has helped you, and why?
Yeah, so there's an app called Fabrique. It's spelled Fabriq, and it's a app that helps you organize your relationships, and it reminds you to stay in touch with the people that you want to stay in touch with. So you can load up to, I think, 150 names into Fabrique. You have your inner circle, your middle circle, and your extended circle or your outer circle. And you can go in and put somebody's name in there and say, hey, I want to make sure that I stay connected with this person every month or every few months. And Fabrique allows you to put in different goals that person is trying to achieve. They, put in their birthday, their anniversary, their favorite candy, all kinds of stuff. It's almost like a personal CRM But what I love about it is, getting a notification from Fabrique saying, hey, you haven't touched base with Jeremy in a while. You should reach out to him. And so I have been able to maintain my relationship so much in such a better way since using that app. So I like to shout them out from the mountaintop anytime I can.
Well, I think I heard about that from you originally, and I have been using it, and I do love it. I think it's really great. So thank you for that recommendation. So James, if people want to connect with you and follow up, what's the best way?
Yeah, so my email is james@foodfishmedia.com. I'm all over LinkedIn, so my last name is spelled Carbary, so you can find me on LinkedIn, James Carbary. And between LinkedIn and email, you should be able to get me. And then sweetfishmedia.com, you can go and see a bunch of the different shows that we produce and hopefully find one that will help you get better at work.
Well, and the fact that you have created over 1,600 episodes, that's just amazing. I don't know if anybody else that's created that many.
Yeah, we're doing multiple episodes a day, and I barely do any of the interviews anymore. We've got, I think, 19 different series of the show with different co-hosts. So we've got a lot of different people creating content for the show. So it's definitely not me. I think I maybe do one episode a week now. So but it's been really, really fun, and I think we're hopefully making an impact in at least the world of B2B marketing right now. Well,
and I have some friends in the tech space that I definitely want to introduce you to who would make good guests for your podcast. So I'll follow up on that.
Awesome.
Well, James, this has been such a joy. Thank you for accepting my invitation. I know you're a very busy person, and you're on your day off with your sweet wife, who's the dolphin trainer, which is
yes.
I'd like to have her on my podcast and talk about being a dolphin trainer at Disney. That's an awesome job. Thank you. And I'm sure everybody in PR Maven Nation enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thank you so much, Nancy. This has been a blast. I really appreciate it.
That's it for this week's episode. I'd like to thank you for listening, and if you feel that you've gotten value out of today's conversation, consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes or whatever app you're using to tune in. If you haven't subscribed yet, you should do so. I release a new episode each week, and subscribing will make sure you get an alert when there's a new episode. You can also join the PR Maven Nation by going to prmaven.com/nation and clicking join. It's free, and it's a great community of like-minded individuals who are all looking to learn and grow from one another. If you have an Alexa-enabled device, be sure to add the PR Maven Marketing Minute to your daily flash briefing menu. Thanks again for listening, and have a great rest of your week, PR Maven Nation.